Hey everybody, it's Never, and welcome to something I'm calling Mirrored Top 10. This is where I list my top 10 worst and then top 10 best of something. And today I'm talking about my experience with Warlords of Draenor. Some of my opinions have changed over time, even drastically, and they may not agree with yours, but I wanted to share my feelings as the expansion comes to a close. So here we go, starting with the very worst and moving gradually to the very best. The worst thing about Warlords of Draenor for me was number 10, the very bottom, Garrison Isolation. Alone in your garrison, doing the maintenance over and over, you could almost do everything from there, so why leave? I think this is what really got to people over time. It killed the sense that WoW was an MMO, and it just made it feel like a single-player game with a map the size of a mini-mall. We just kept sending our followers out on missions for free gold, but at what cost? See what I did there? That was kind of poetic. That was really the worst part of the whole expansion for me, is how trapped we all felt in our garrisons. And the strange thing is, we even had the choice to leave them, but we didn't. And that's the frustrating thing. So number 9, the Shipyard. This is one of the most poignant examples of Blizzard missing the mark. The Shipyard took what we hated about the garrison and actually amplified it. It would have been better if it had just been scrapped and left out completely. Number 8, the Garrison Campaign. To be honest, I was never really clear on exactly what the Garrison Campaign was or how far into it I had gotten. It all felt like more maintenance quests. I was confused by how to make the quests happen, or what they meant, or how to know which quests were part of the campaign. I was the guy fixing the ice machine, not a commander, not a hero. I was just hired help. That's what the quests made me feel like, and it didn't really work. Number 7, the Legendary Ring. I was honestly suspicious of Khadgar throughout the whole expansion, and I still am. Even though the opinion I've had of Khadgar has improved quite a bit with the movie, and Khadgar was my favorite character in the movie, he still seems really way too weird and creepy for me to trust him. The ring itself didn't feel legendary at all. It felt like I was just working to fund Khadgar's research, and he handed me out some of his leftover stuff. While we served his agenda and did his busy work, the whole thing was just really grindy and didn't really feel that heroic. It's a useful, really powerful item, but that isn't enough to make it feel like it was a good feature. Number 6, professions. The garrison professions were oversimplified and in some cases altogether unnecessary. I have engineering and enchanting, and I've had them for a very long time. In the process of leveling up engineering, I never had to go to the auction house to buy ore. I never even had to speak to another living soul. I just gathered from my free mine and went to my engineering hut to make one material and build everything out of it. The only redeeming thing I can think of is the weapon enchantment illusions. Professions were pretty much sort of a train wreck in Warlords of Draenor. They honestly didn't matter at all, and that's not the right way to be. People want their professions to matter. They want them to feel like it sets them apart from someone who doesn't have the profession, and Warlords of Draenor worked directly against that whole idea. Number 5, the lore. The best deduction I can make is that Warlords of Draenor was forced to coincide with the Warcraft movie, but things didn't work as planned, so they moved on to Legion early. They've admitted some of this, that Legion was taking longer than they thought it should, and that's why there's a content drought. There's a lot of things that add up to that, but the point is that Warlords of Draenor was sort of this big mistake anomaly. The trouble is, anyone could have filled the role of doing what Warlords of Draenor actually does in the story. The story of Warlords of Draenor's only lasting purpose is to put Gul'dan back in the picture because he brings the Legion to Azeroth. But the problem is, anyone could have done that. So the story is basically pointless. Imagine for a moment that Garrosh had been the one to bring Legion instead. So it could have been his final revenge. And what would have happened is, as soon as he escapes from his prison at the end of Mists of Pandaria between the two expansions, he goes and he starts doing whatever Gul'dan did to bring the Legion. And then Garrosh just does it. And then he takes the role of Gul'dan in Legion. It easily could have been that. It would have been Garrosh's last stab at getting to us, but instead we got one of the most confusing story devices I know of. I really dislike alternate timelines in the first place, especially if they have to stick around. For a little pocket here and there, it's not that big of a problem, but when it's a major part of a story and it requires that to tell it, it's one of the most frustrating things I run into in stories, and this one was worse than most. Number 4, capital cities. I mean, really, what happened? We were supposed to get Bladespire Citadel and Karabor, but that got swallowed up by the Garrison. Just one more reason to not like the Garrison. There's even an item you can still get from the Frostwolf Quartermaster that ports you to Bladespire. It might have been better to have the Garrison plot buildings inside of Bladespire or Karabor with all the same functions, and you could just choose which ones you want to have access to, just like you choose which buildings to put in your garrison. Imagine how much better that would have been if everyone's running around that really cool Bladespire Citadel or Karabor and visiting all the different shops, kind of like we did in Dalaran during Wrath of the Lich King, and doing the same things the Garrison had, honestly. It would have been better because there would have been stuff happening. You would have been able to run around the thing like doing laps in Dalaran. It could have been great, but it was terrible. Number 3, factions. The lore behind most of the factions wasn't that bad, and it was even good in some cases, but the rewards and the reputation methods were really lacking. While there was a good variety of ways to gain reputation with the various factions, there was little incentive to do so. Most of them I only completed because I like achievements, and the rewards were pretty awful. A dozen different bower skins and almost as many wolves and several other reskins of mounts that I had within the first couple of weeks from my Garrison stables just didn't really seem to cut it for the rewards. The worst of it, though, is the mounts that should have belonged to some of the factions ended up in the store instead. The Ravager or Fey Dragon that they use as flight paths in-game for the Laughing Skull or whatever there is over by Auchindoun, those things should have been rewards for those factions, but instead we got reskins of other stuff, and Blizzard put those in the store instead. I mean, they kind of made up for it with the Ironbound Wraith Charger and the Moose, but it would have been nice to have those other things where they belong. Number 2 is Grom Hellscream. He's the poster child for the Iron Horde bent on our destruction, and then suddenly he's our friend because he had a change of heart, and Yrel, or I don't know. I'm all for a mighty change of heart, but I'm not stupid. If Hitler had woken up one day and said, those Jews aren't so bad, would we have just patted him on the back and ordered a pizza together? Probably not. I don't think that the resolution of Grom Hellscream's story was interesting at all. And in fact, I think that Grom Hellscream throughout Warlords of Draenor was really a non-character. He was never really there and hardly did anything. He showed up in just a handful of quests, and he was really just there so he could be there. I felt a little more connection to Kargath Bladefist than I did to Grom. And finally, number 1, which is almost a good thing, is character boosts. Leveling is an important experience for the new player. It lets them learn the ropes at their own pace and teaches them how to play the game well enough over time to actually play it and level. But if the leveling process is too long, then it should be shortened and not skipped. There's 2 sides of this argument, though, and Blizzard's recently come out with some good points about this. The boost exists for someone who needs a quick jump up to max level. And they're even slowing down the level progression for leveling up as you go, which I'm a fan of, honestly, because it's a little more like it used to be. But the problem is we have so many levels that if you slow it down, it takes forever, and it still causes a problem. The thing is, we need each level to take more time, and so that you don't out-level your zone long before you're done with even the main storyline for it. But we also need people to be able to get to max level sooner. But it's a bad idea to take people from kindergarten and drop them into college, and that's essentially what a character boost does, unless you definitely have some friends there to help you learn the ropes. Even the experience through to Nan Jungle that exists right now for the level 100 boost is still kind of an awful way to learn to play your character. It's only decent for veteran players, and honestly, veteran players don't need that. So it's a good idea in theory, but in practice it still doesn't quite work how it should. So at 0, right in the middle, we've got the bad stuff out of the way, we're about to get into the good stuff, but an honorable mention in the middle is Farallon. It's sad that it never made it in, but I understand how things go sometimes, and especially if the movie deadline theory is to be believed. If 6.1 had included it, we may not be so critical of Warlords of Draenor overall today, but what's done is done, or, well, not done in this case. I'm honestly kind of glad that they didn't bring Farallon out at this point, so that means we can get more stuff in Legion. In some of the recent things they've put out, they've admitted that adding more people to the World of Warcraft team does not make the game come out faster. It doesn't make content come sooner, it just makes more of it come when it does. This is a very well-documented thing when it comes to software development. If you want to learn more about that, look up the Mythical Man Month, and it'll explain the whole thing very well. So, on to the good things. Number 1, the lowest of the good things, is Ashrun, after it was fixed. Ashrun for me actually worked pretty well. It wasn't the best PvPvE experience I've ever had, but it was fun and it felt adequately rewarding. I felt like my contribution affected my team's performance and cooperation, and the winning really came from applying the correct formula of people working together. And it was less Zergy than I thought it would be. It was still pretty Zergy and probably more Zergy than I really like, but it wasn't as bad as it was at first or as I thought it was going to be. Though it still had its minor problems, I felt like in the end it turned out pretty decent, and I did have quite a bit of fun in Ashrun in general once they got it kind of tuned how it should be. So number 2, a little better, is Nan Jungle. On the heels of a sparse update that could arguably not even really be called a real patch with a selfie camera, we got 6.2, which is touted as one of the biggest patches ever. I'm not really sure if that's true, but we'll run with it. And with that, we got Nan Jungle, which was the spiritual successor to the Timeless Isle. And though it was quite a bit more gloomy, Nan had a solid variety of gameplay and a good open feel to it and some real clever mechanics with a range of difficulties. You could take it easy one day and just go around kicking over boxes, or you could really test yourself and go do Throne of Kil'jaeden solo, or even solo some of the rares that were tougher. It also included a really sensible way to unlock flying, and while I think flying is a topic for another video, I am happy with the compromise that we ended up with. In the end, I see Nan Jungle as a successful patch and a successful addition to the game, though perhaps not somewhere I'm likely to return as much as I'm likely to go to the Timeless Isle. The problem with Nan Jungle is it was really quick and easy to get everything it had to offer. And in some ways I'm kind of happy for that, because it just means that I'm able to get done with Warlords of Draenor that much sooner, but it's a sad thing to be happy about, because it really should be something that I was wishing there was more to do. Number 3, stat changes. The removal of stats like hidden expertise were a really good choice, and it made gearing simpler without losing the depth that it really requires. I like having choices in the stats that I put on my gear. Multi-strike was kind of a weird animal, and I'm not sorry to see it leave, because it's really just crit that works slightly different. But the tertiary stats like speed and indestructible are a lot of fun and useful, even though severely underutilized in the game. And then there's the stat squish, which is it's a decent start to solving one of the biggest problems in WoW, which I made a video about a while back, but in short, we need a lot more squishing, and I miss vanilla numbers. That's probably yet another video coming on how I think we should handle that, especially after hearing a little more of what the devs are capable of doing with the game engine now. Number 4, dungeons. Draenor's dungeons were actually really great. Maybe not the best dungeons ever, but certainly a top tier. The variety of the dungeons, the locations, the mechanics, and the presence of the almost mini-boss-like mobs that were here and there, and the extra challenge of Mythic made the difficulty of these dungeons very enjoyable and a lot more fun than I've had with any dungeons since Wrath of the Lich King. It was seriously great content, and I'm glad that they're taking this even further in Legion. Number 5, storage and UI improvements. One of the challenges I faced all throughout my time playing is running out of places to put stuff that I want to keep. The addition of the collection system, including the Toy Box and Heirlooms tabs, was one of the biggest quality of life changes ever to WoW, at least as far as I'm concerned. The reagent bank has taken some of the biggest headaches away from crafting and freed up bag space where you really needed it. Improvements to the questing UI and more raid and dungeon maps just means more add-ons I don't have to keep updating. And the way that they're adding on to this even more in Legion is absolutely wonderful. Number 6, personal loot. I love personal loot. I know not everyone does, but I really like it. Loot drama is gone. We don't need to spend a bunch of time going through DKP or EPGP or Loot Council. We don't have to install add-ons to do loot. I mean, really, what's the downside? I love personal loot because it eliminates the 2 major problems from raiding. The aforementioned loot drama, which just does not happen with it, and having to spend time distributing loot. The boss dies, you got a piece of gear or you didn't. If you want to try again, push your little button and you get another try using your reroll token. And that's that. Everyone's done with loot inside of about 10 to 30 seconds instead of having to spend maybe a collective 30 minutes every raid night just distributing loot. And that's not even to say if somebody gets all upset that they didn't get what they think they deserve. Personal loot is my friend, and any loss of passing gear down to someone else or whatever is no big deal to me when it comes to not having loot drama. Number 7, the outdoor world. Draenor is actually pretty beautiful, and it's got a good variety of landscapes, interesting little nooks and crannies, and wallpaper-worthy scenery. The quests are fun and clever, and they tell engaging local stories with memorable characters. Not everybody feels that way, but I honestly really did enjoy the questing content and the layout and the features in the zones. I think it was one of the strongest things in the expansion. The treasures and toys and even the jumping puzzles and world bosses and rare anomalies like Pound Fist and the Void Talon portals, they made the outdoor world of Draenor really shine. It's too bad we had so little reason to keep going back out there. I'm going to throw the new character models into this category just because it's part of the visual package, and I think the new models were done as well as could have been hoped. Blizzard even continued to work on them after release to make sure that they got them right and address some of the concerns the community had brought up. I know that not everybody likes them or likes the outside world, but I think the vast majority of people are very pleased with the new character models, and I certainly think that they are one of the best updates the game has had in years. It looks like a whole new game just from that, and the difference that you have comparing the old models to the new models, it really fast forwarded the game and brought some new life into it. And with the way that WoW's art style is, it really buys some time and means they don't need to redo the game engine or any nonsense like that. Number 8, raids. The worst thing about the Warlords of Draenor raids is that there were only 3 of them, but all 3 of them were outstanding. Non-linear progression, clever boss fights with memorable mechanics, and just the right amount of humor and a decent challenge made it one of the best raiding experiences I've ever had. Some of my favorite fights were Imperator, Kargath, Twins, Blackhand, Gruul, Thogar, Darmak, Hans and Franz, Iskar, and Tyrant. And not all of these are very popular fights. A couple of them that I feel like I should explain is Thogar. Now, Thogar, some people hate that fight. I think it's absolutely wonderful. Getting killed by a train is hilarious and just spectacular. And I think Fat Boss even did a video about this pretty recently, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything they said. One fight that they didn't like that I really liked was Darmok, the guy with the 3 beasts. I'm not really sure why, but I guess I just loved the ways that you could kind of cheese that fight to make it easier if you were on point. Being able to move away and dodge the rend and tear that he does made me feel like a pretty awesome tank. And Iskar, you know, the reason that Iskar is so good, it may actually just be for that sound effect that plays when he's charging up his laser beam. Oh man, I love that, but I honestly really enjoyed the fight too. And the others, I think it's pretty obvious what was fun about them, but that's another thing. Raiding in the expansion was great, and I'm really glad to see that they're continuing on with raiding in a similar fashion. The only really bad thing I could say, other than the small amount of raids, is maybe the number of difficulties we have, because I do think that 4 difficulties is too many. I think we could get by with what we need by only having 2 difficulties, maybe even 1 if we did a bunch of other things just right. But 4, in my opinion, is overkill and unnecessary. Number 9, Timewalking. This is a feature that I love, and I'm very glad to hear that they are planning to expand more. Timewalking is nostalgic fun in just the right amounts. It's gear rewards for people that are just starting out, and it's mounts and toys for people who don't need the gear and just want to have a good time. I love this system, and I look forward to every Timewalking event that happens. Reliving the dungeons of the past with the skills and equipment that I have now is fantastic, and I really hope we see Timewalking raids in the future. I've got some ideas on how that can work, but that's, again, another video. Finally, number 10, what I think is the best thing to come out of Warlords of Draenor is the group finder. Now, I'm not talking about LFR or the dungeon matching thing. I don't think LFR needs to exist. And the dungeon matching has, in most ways, only done harm to the game. But I'm talking about Blizzard's replacement for OQ. And may OQ rest in peace. The group finder tool has made life so much easier for me. Being able to raid when I want and fill any missing spots almost effortlessly with people from my entire region is spectacular. Being able to realm hop and cut down on camp times for rares, or avoid PvP if you need a break from your PvP server, or being able to start up a group for anything you want, and it gives you a tool to find people that want to do the same thing too. It's just a wonderful feature, and that's why it deserves the top of my favorites of Warlords of Draenor. Now it was really tough to order these last few, because new character models is a big deal for me, but that's one of those things that is really cool at first, but then you get used to it right away. The raids are really cool while they're there, but as soon as you move on from them, they really are only useful for something like maybe Timewalking, which only happens once in a while. But the group finder is a system and a tool that allowed me to experience the other things. I would not have been able to get ahead of the curve in each tier without the group finder. It was sort of the foundational feature in Warlords of Draenor that made all the other stuff that was good about it actually worthwhile. It's a wonderful thing, and I remember using OQ before, but it was so frustrating and it was updated way too often. It's just so nice to see Blizzard take good ideas and implement them directly into the game. So even though this feature is easily overlooked, the group finder was the glue that held it all together for me. And that is Warlords of Draenor for me, from the very worst of it to the very best of it. All in all, it honestly wasn't that bad of an expansion. It's just that the bad stuff made it so easy to forget the good stuff that most of the good stuff didn't really seem as great as it might have been. So it looks like Legion's going to be better. I really hope it is, and I think that it's better to hold on to hope than to just go into something expecting failure. That's just kind of how I look at it. Anyway, I'm glad that you stuck around long enough to watch the video. Let me know what your least and most favorite things about Warlords of Draenor were in the comments. I'd love to see the ways that you agree with what I said or the ways that you disagree with what I said, because one of the great things about this game is how differently everyone can enjoy it. Okay, thanks, bye.